Welcome to Time Travelling Team, the weekly podcast where we review every story of Doctor Who right from the very beginning. I'm Paddy.
And I'm Tricia. Today we'll be following the Doctor and Stephen as they head into their latest adventure in the Massacre of St. Bartholomew's Eve. We'll be discussing the Doctor, the companions, the villains, and give your thoughts on the story as a whole.
We would also love to hear your thoughts on the story itself, so to join in the discussion, you can check us out at Time Teamp, that's TIMETEAMP, on Facebook, Twitter and Instagram, or you can email us at timetravelingteam@teamproductions.com. Now though, onto the story recap. Episode 1, War of God. The TARDIS lands in an unused lot beside an alleyway. The Doctor observes their surroundings and declares that they have arrived in the late medieval to late 17th century era of France. Stephen pulls the Doctor into an alcove as a well-dressed man appears in the alleyway and makes his way to a nearby house for what appears to be a secret meeting. After he goes in, the Doctor says due to the style of the man's clothes that they are in the late 16th century, and that he hopes that he can meet a famous apothecary named Preslin that lived during this time. They hear the people coming out of the house and go back into hiding. The well-dressed man, whose name is Gaston de Lorraine, and his colleague Nicolas Mus are discussing the tensions between Catholics and Protestants in Paris, and that they need to keep the peace between the two groups. After they leave, the Doctor and Stephen return to the TARDIS to change into more appropriate clothes and for the Doctor to review some old documents he has had on board. In a nearby tavern, Gaston and his fellow Huguenots are toasting to the health of Henry of Navarre, a Protestant prince who was recently married into the Catholic royal family. Another patron, Simon de Val, offers an additional toast to Henry's bride Marguerite, which leads to a thinly veiled insult from Gaston and the Huguenots. Nicholas tries to play peacemaker between the two noblemen, but is to no avail as Gaston mockingly toasts Marguerite. Simon leaves, but before he goes, he enlists the tavern's landlord, a devout Catholic, to keep an eye on Gaston and the others and report back to him on their movements. Simon takes a parting shot at Gaston, which causes him to draw his sword, but he is stopped by Nicholas before he does anything rash. The Doctor and Stephen enter as Simon leaves, with the Doctor calling for some drinks while telling Stephen to ignore the commotion. As they relax, Stephen says he doesn't want to stay in the TARDIS whilst the Doctor visits Preslin. The Doctor says that he will only be bored by their scientific discussions, but he is reluctant to let Stephen wander through Paris by himself, as he could bring undue attention. Stephen promises to be careful, and the Doctor relents, giving Stephen some money and instructing him to return to the tavern that evening so that he can return to the TARDIS together. As he leaves, the Doctor accidentally bumps into an entering patron, but doesn't notice the look of recognition on the man's face, nor the fact that he follows after him. Stephen notices the events at the door and makes to follow after the man and the Doctor, but the landlord says that he needs to pay for the drinks first. A disagreement ensues between Stephen and the landlord due to the fact that Stephen does not know the correct coins to pay for the drinks. Nicholas overhears the argument and pays on Stephen's behalf. Stephen thanks him and asks for directions to Preslin's apothecary shop, but Nicholas says that he doesn't recognise the name, but he does promise to lead Stephen to the district he is located in after they first have a drink. Stephen is eager to go after the Doctor as he is worried about the man following him and tensions within the city itself. However, Nicholas insists that he join him and his friends for a drink, but promises they will go afterwards. Gaston is wary of Stephen due to the fact that he is a recent arrival in France and is in the same tavern as him and Nicholas. It turns out that Gaston is tasked with keeping Prince Henry safe, whilst Nicholas has a similar responsibility to Admiral de Coligny. Stephen again expresses an eagerness to go to find the Doctor, and Nicholas escorts him outside to give directions. The Doctor arrives at Preslin's shop, but instead of finding the man himself, he finds a frightened man who says that Preslin has left the city. The Doctor expresses his disappointment and talks about the amazing work Preslin was doing in the field of germ research, causing the old man to slip up and reveal himself to be Preslin. He says that he has to be careful in these current times, but the Doctor agrees with this statement, only to open further discussions about Preslin's work. During their conversation, Preslin says that the reason for his deception is due to the arrival of the Abbot of Amboise, a puritanical member of the Church who views science as heresy and has been known to imprison scientists. The Doctor thinks on this. Back outside the tavern, a young girl is fleeing a group of soldiers. She knocks into Stephen after he leaves the tavern and then rushes inside. The soldiers go in after her and are greeted by Gaston, who acknowledges them as being members of the Cardinal's Guard. They ask where the girl went, saying that she has been selected to be a servant for the Abbot of Amboise. Gaston says that she doesn't appear to be too keen on the idea, and a standoff ensues between the soldiers and Gaston and his friends. Outnumbered, the soldiers depart, with their captain saying he will report back to the Abbot. Stephen re-enters to check on the girl, and Gaston calls him back to the table and fobs off Stephen's concerns for the girl due to her Catholic heritage. Gaston summons the girl and questions her, threatening to call back the guards if she doesn't talk to them. She reveals that her name is Anne and that she's been fleeing because she overheard the captain and another speaking about an impending reoccurrence of the events that happened at Ossé. She breaks down in tears as Gaston and Nicholas are shaken with fear. When Stephen asks what had happened at Wassaye, they tell him that 10 years before in the village, 100 Huguenots were slaughtered by Catholics. Nicholas sends her to the house of his master, Admiral de Coligny, for protection, whilst Gaston goes to check on Prince Henry. Nicholas explains to Stephen that the recent marriage between Henry and Princess Marguerite was orchestrated by the Queen Mother to try and heal the religious divide in France, and what Anne overheard indicates a potential threat to Henry's life by Catholics. Nicholas leaves and Stephen decides to stay in the tavern to wait for the doctor. Elsewhere, the captain is in a meeting with Simon Duval and the man that was trailing the doctor, and they are discussing the runaway girl and what she potentially overheard. Simon says to search for any relatives the girl may have in Paris. He then goes to the tavern and gathers the information from what transpired from the landlord. He then goes over to Stephen and strikes up a conversation with him. He advises Stephen to be mindful of the city curfew and that he will need to find some place to stay. Stephen thanks him for his concern and says once his friends arrive, they will be departing Paris. Simon goes to leave, but before he can, Nicholas re-enters, forcing him into hiding. Nicholas says that Stephen can stay with him at the Coligny's house and tells the landlord to leave a message for the doctor. After he leaves, Simon once again bribes the landlord to tell him of everything that occurs. Back at the meeting room, the man who followed the doctor is giving his report about the runaway girl to the abbot, who grows increasingly irate as he talks. Simon enters and reveals what he has found out, and the abbot orders him to retrieve the girl. The abbot is an exact double of the doctor. Episode 2. The Sea Beggar. Gaston has arrived at Nicholas's accommodation, giving out about the fact that Henry seems to be ignoring the potential threat to his life. Nicholas informs him Admiral de Coligny is also reluctant to believe the word of the servant girl. The two men express their frustrations at having to wait until more evidence presents itself. Nicholas voices his opinion that maybe Anne misheard things and in her terror assumed that they were talking about Wassaye and the mysterious upcoming event were connected, but when they could actually be two separate things. Meanwhile, Stephen has returned from the tavern and informs him that the doctor did not return there. Nicholas offers to help him, but Gaston, who has been looking out of the window, announces that another visitor has arrived, the abbot of Amboise' secretary, Roger Courbet. Gaston says that he is more than likely come for the girl. Courbet enters and Stephen recognises him as the man who followed the doctor, but says nothing for the time being. Courbet echoes Nicholas's earlier statement about Anne misinterpreted what she heard and that he has come to return her to the abbot's service. Anne then enters with drinks, but Gaston dismisses her immediately and tells Courbet that her name is Genevieve, a long-time servant of the Coligny's household. Courbet leaves and Stephen informs them of his recognition of the man. Before they can discuss it any further, Gaston calls their attention to the window and shows them that the abbot himself has arrived. Stephen is confused and states that it's the doctor, which immediately arouses Gaston and Nicholas's suspicions in him of being a spy for the abbot. Stephen says that the abbot looks exactly like the doctor and that he isn't a spy. He asks Nicholas to accompany him to President's shop so that he can prove it, but Gaston fears it could be a trap. Nicholas says that he will risk it and tells Stephen that he had better be telling the truth. In another part of Paris, Simon is giving his report to the Marshal Tanavet about Anne and the abbot's attempts to reclaim her. Tavernet gets irate at this foolishness and instructs Simon to keep an eye on him. Simon also informs about Stephen's association with Nicholas, and the Marshal suspects that due to Stephen's heritage, the Admiral de Coligny is conspiring with the English monarchy. Tavernier instructs Simon to add Stephen to the list of his spying duties and also instructs him to inform the abbot that they will discuss something called the Sea Beggar later. As he says the name, the Coligny enters and assumes that they are discussing the Dutch and their conflict with the Spanish. They discuss the political state of affairs in Europe and opposing opinions on how to handle their difference due to their religions. Tavernier inquires about Stephen's presence, but de Coligny says that he was just a simple traveller and says that he is too suspicious. Tavernier then reparts for an audience with the Queen Mother. After hours of searching and with Nicholas's suspicion increasing, Stephen finds President's shop. However, there is no answer to their knocks, and a passing woman relates the story of President's disappearance a few years beforehand, echoing President's own cover story to the doctor. Nicholas grows angrier with each passing minute and accuses the doctor of being an alias for the abbot and that Stephen is working for him. Stephen denies this and instead suggests that maybe the doctor is impersonating the abbot for some reason and offers to prove this to Nicholas. However, Nicholas has had enough and says he will take Stephen back to the others to answer their questions, but Stephen escapes. At the abbot's quarters, Simon and Courbet are waiting for him to return. Courbet says that he is most likely out with the assassin that has been sent to aid him, but Simon reprimands him to use the code name given for him lest the target get wind of his presence in Paris. Simon then instructs Courbet to find out what he can about Stephen and his purpose there. At the Admiral's quarters, Nicholas returns and informs Gaston of Stephen's escape and that he is most likely an agent of the abbot. Anne overhears this and stands up for Stephen, citing his kind nature and the fact that he is a stranger to Paris to support his innocence, but Gaston dismisses her. Nicholas tells Gaston that Stephen has most likely returned to the abbot's quarters. Stephen has in fact gone to the abbot's, sneaking past the guards and climbing up towards an open window. He overhears Tavernier reprimanding Simon and Corbet for not locating the abbot. He then tells them to resume their search in order to tell the abbot that he has been given the order for the sea beggar to be killed tomorrow. After he leaves, Simon informs Corbet that it is actually the Queen Mother who was given the order. Stephen leaves and returns to Nicholas's chambers. He is told to wait by a servant, but decides to find a pen and paper to leave a note. As he is searching the desk for writing implements, Gaston arrives and seeing Stephen rifling through his friend's documents, orders him to get out, refusing to listen to Stephen's news. He then draws his sword on him, forcing Stephen to draw his own to defend himself. Gaston disarms him and again orders him to leave, throwing his weapon back at him. Nicholas arrives in after he leaves and gives out to Gaston when he relates what happened, saying Stephen would only risk coming back if he had important information for them. He tells Gaston to get out, which he dejectedly does so. Stephen is making his way through the streets of Paris, being followed at a distance by Anne. Stephen ducks into hiding as he feels he is being followed and jumps out again once Anne passes him. She apologises, but says that she was following to look after him, but to also enlist his help as she can't risk staying at the Coligny's house anymore. Stephen suggested they go to Presley's shop, as no one would think to look for them there. Back in Nicholas's room, the Coligny enters as he returns from a meeting with the king, where he successfully convinced the king to assist the Dutch in their war against the Spanish. He also reveals his new nickname, given to him by the king, that reflects his advocacy for the Dutch and their own cultural origins. He says that he is proud to be known as the Sea Beggar. Episode 3. Priest of Death. In Presley's shop, Anne accidentally wakes up Stephen and informs him that it is morning. Stephen decides that he will need to go back to the abbot's house in the hopes of finding the doctor there and stop the impending assassination of the Coligny. Anne tries to dissuade him from the course of action, saying that he will certainly be recognised and captured. Stephen says that he will need to change clothes to avoid detection and that he and Anne scour the shop to find what he needs. Stephen tries to convince Anne to join him, but she is too afraid to go back to the abbot's house. He promises to look after her, and if they are recognised, then they can split up and return to Presley's shop. In the Royal Council chamber, the Coligny is arguing with Tannevay about the king's decision to go to war alongside the Dutch. They bicker back and forth until the king calls a halt to it, saying that he supports the Coligny. Tavernier tries a new tactic by saying the treasury doesn't have enough money to support the war and that they have to open the royal hunting grounds so they can collect payment from hunters. This seems to give the king pause, and the conversation is quickly changed to other matters, which upsets the Coligny. Talk then turns to the religious unrest between the Catholics and the Protestants, with the Coligny saying that despite the Queen Mother's brokering of a peace between the two factions, actions speak louder than words. He also alludes to her being the real power in France, a statement that infuriates Tannevay. The Queen Mother refuses to rise to the debate, and she has Tavernier escort her from the room. The king then disbands the council until after the feast of St. Bartholomew, which is tomorrow. At the abbot's quarters, Stephen and Anne are shown to a waiting room by a priest and told that the abbot will see them after his morning prayers. Stephen insists on seeing him now as he has urgent news for him. The abbot appears and Stephen greets him as the doctor, but the abbot orders him to be silent. Stephen, realising that he is not the doctor, informs him that he has brought Anne back to him in an effort to buy himself some time. The abbot thanks him and dismisses the priest, who leaves just as Tavernier enters. The abbot reveals through the conversation with Tavernier that the sea beggar is the Coligny, and once they leave, Stephen says that he and Anne need to warn Nicholas about the threat to his master's life. Tavernier is filling in the abbot about the events in the meeting when Corbet arrives and informs him that he has seen Stephen and Anne leaving the building and alerts him to his friendship with Nicholas. Tavernier reprimands the abbot for his lack of prudence when he didn't ask Stephen to identify himself, and warns the abbot that for his sake, Stephen had better not ruin their plans. Stephen returns to Nicholas's office and informs him that the Admiral is the target, and Nicholas rushes to the street where the assassination is to take place. He arrives too late as the Coligny is shot, but he is only wounded in the arm. Nicholas escorts him back to the house as the Coligny's men go to search the house that the shot came from. Back at the abbot's house, Tavernier refuses to let him leave until they get news about the assassination, saying that his connection to the Cardinal will not be enough to save him if they fail. Corbet enters and informs him that the Coligny still lives. Tavernier summons the guards to kill the abbot as a spy. In the royal chambers, the king and the Queen Mother are informed of the attempt on the Coligny's life, and the Queen Mother slips away unnoticed as the king rages and demands that the assassin and the conspirators be found. Once they are safe back at his house, the Coligny falls unconscious as they wait for a doctor, and Nicholas asks Stephen to tell him everything he knows about the plot. Stephen mentions the conversation he heard between Tavernier and the abbot, but identifies Corbet as one of the plotters. He also remains insistent that the abbot is actually the doctor, who is acting the part for some unknown reason. As they are arguing, council member Daleks arrives and informs them of the unrest in the city due to the assassination attempt. He tells them that the abbot has been murdered and that his death is being blamed on the Huguenots. Stephen rushes off in a state of horror at the perceived death of his friend. Back at the council chambers, the king orders Tavernier to set up a protective cordon around Daleks' house and that they are to remove all Catholics from the area as well. Daleks advises against this as it could make anti-Protestant feelings grow in the city. The king, however, is too enraged at the attempt on his friend's life and demands that his orders be carried out. He disbands the council so that he can be alone, but the Queen Mother arrives, ignoring his orders. He threatens to have her arrested as an accomplice along with Tavernier in the assassination attempt and have them both executed. The Queen Mother, however, tells him that Tavernier was only seeking to protect them and then produces death threats that were sent to her. She says that despite his benevolent rule over them, the Huguenots are plotting to overthrow him and replace him with Henry of Navarre. Outside the abbot's house, an angry mob has formed and demand vengeance against the Huguenots for his murder. Stephen arrives and investigates the body. As he is doing this, Courbet arrives and, seeing an opportunity to get rid of him, tells an angry crowd that it was Stephen who murdered the abbot, causing them to chase him through the streets. Episode 4. Bell of Doom. Back in President's shop, Anne is waiting for Stephen to return. She suddenly hears a knock on the door and Stephen begs her to let him in. He tells her about what he saw outside the abbot's house and acts despondent at the concept of the doctor being dead. Anne asks him what he was going to do, and he says he needs to try and find the key to the TARDIS. He says that they need to search the shop as it is the only place that he knows that the doctor visited. They search through various drawers and chests and they locate the doctor's walking stick. Anne suggests that maybe he went away with Preslin, but Stephen relates the fate of the apothecary that he was told earlier. Suddenly a voice calls out that the story is false and Stephen looks up to see the doctor. At Tavernier's quarters, Simon and Tavernier are discussing the recent events and say that they need to find Stephen as soon as possible to be a scapegoat for the abbot's murder. A messenger arrives and gives Tavernier a summons from the Queen Mother. He leaves and Simon reads the note that he left behind. At the colony's house, Gaston is arguing with the Admiral that he is still in danger and that they should not trust any Catholic aid. He suggests getting the Admiral out of Paris, but Nicholas says that he is too weak to be moved. Gaston leaves angrily, telling them to take care of themselves. After he leaves, Nicholas, the Daleks and the Colony ponder Gaston's words and wonder if they've put themselves in further danger. At Preslin's shop, the Doctor and Stephen bicker over whose fault it was that they got separated, but the Doctor puts a stop to it by saying that they should go back to the TARDIS. Anne informs them that they can't go now due to the curfew, but they can go tomorrow as the city will be easier to navigate due to the St. Bartholomew's Day festival. Stephen chimes in about the fact that the festival is still going ahead with everything that occurred. Suddenly, the Doctor demands that Anne tell him the year, and she says that it is 1572. The Doctor orders her to leave at once and find somewhere to stay, but she says that she has nowhere to go. The Doctor tells her that if she leaves now and goes to her aunt's house, then she will be safe, and if she stays inside tomorrow. Stephen is incredulous as Anne bids them goodbye and demands to know what is going on, but the Doctor refuses to tell him and insists that they need to get back to the TARDIS. At the Queen Mother's chambers, Tavernier is reviewing the list of names when the Queen Mother arrives bearing a letter from the King, saying that their plan has been sanctioned. However, Tavernier is taken aback when the Queen Mother decrees that the people of Paris will do their job for them and eliminate not just the names on the list, but any Huguenot that they can come across. He convinces her to ensure Prince Henry's safety, as his death would incite a holy war across Europe. She relents and instructs him to get Henry out of the city, and once it is done, to close the city gates so that no Huguenot can escape. Simon enters after she leaves and relishes the new orders that have been given to them, but is irate when Tavernier tasks him with getting Henry out of the city. The Doctor and Stephen arrive at the TARDIS, which is actually close to the colony's house, and therefore near the guards stationed outside. As they are discussing how to gain access to it, the guards are relieved of duty, much to their confusion, by a larger squad. The Doctor and Stephen use this opportunity and dash into the TARDIS. The ship takes off as the soldiers force their way into the house. We are then shown a montage of the massacre taking place in the city, that claims the lives of thousands of Huguenots, including the Colonier, Nicholas, Gaston, and the Thelonier. The Doctor relays all this information to a horrified Stephen, who laments the fact that there was nothing that could have been done. He gives out to the Doctor for not taking Anne with them, and that he essentially sentenced her to death. He demands to be let off the next time the TARDIS lands, saying that he no longer wants to travel with the Doctor if he is so ambivalent to the loss of lives that could have been saved. The ship lands and the Doctor gives Stephen a parting message about how time can be a cruel thing to travel in, but in the end he stands by his decision as it was the right thing to do. With that, Stephen leaves. The Doctor sits down in the TARDIS, sad that he is now alone, and bemoans the fact that all the others have left him as well. He contemplates returning to his home planet, but realises that that is an impossibility. As he makes preparations to take off, a young girl rushes in and asks where the telephone is. The Doctor is taken aback by her lack of recognition of her surroundings and tells her that she should try to find the police outside somewhere else. The girl asks him who he is, and he tries to tell her who he is and what the ship does, but she is too confused by what he is saying. As he tries to get her to leave again, Stephen re-enters the TARDIS and tells the Doctor to take off. Stephen tells him that there are 2 policemen on the way to use the police box, and so the Doctor does indeed take off. Stephen then notices that the girl is still on board and is amazed at how blasé she seems to be about everything. She says that she has no close family and doesn't really mind what's happening. The Doctor comments on her similarity to Susan and asks her name. She introduces herself as Dodo, her preferred title to her full name of Dorothea Chaplet. Stephen perks up on the name, and when Dodo mentions that she has French ancestors, the Doctor tells him that there is a possibility of a relationship between her and Anne. With introductions made all around and Dodo insisting on being addressed as such, the TARDIS takes its crew off to its next adventure. End of the story. So now that's the summary out of the way, we're going to go over to the trivia section with Trish for some notes. So Trish, over to you.
Thank you very much. So the air date for this story was the 5th of February 1966 to the 26th of February 1966. The writers credited with this story are John Lucarotti and Donald Tosh. John Lucarotti we have discussed before. We've seen his work in The Aztecs and Marco Polo, though obviously we don't get to enjoy Marco Polo in its original form anymore. John also wrote the novelization for all 3 of these stories. So that's The Aztecs, Marco Polo, and The Massacre. Donald Tosh was actually the script editor of Doctor Who from The Time Meddler up to the 3rd episode of The Massacre. Tosh wrote the final drafts of all 4 episodes, amending John's originals extensively. He was only credited on Bell of Doom though, because during the production of the first 3 episodes, he was still on the BBC staff as Doctor Who's story editor, and you can't be credited as the writer while you're the sitting story editor.
Gotcha.
Apparently. So this is actually where things get interesting though, because since this is a lost story, and thank you to Loose Cannon, by the way, because no footage of the title sequence actually exists, no one can say with any certainty whether John's name was actually on the first 3 episodes.
Yeah, because when Loose Cannon did this, so normally the way that the episode title would appear is the episode title would appear over the start of an actual scene. So for this one instead, there's a kind of a painted backdrop with the episode title appearing on it. Yeah,
so they created that themselves, and actually in an interview that Loose Cannon had with Donald Tosh, he said that John Lucarotti may not have received any on-screen credit, and that the first 3 episodes may have actually gone to broadcast with no writer name on them. A different view though is available, which seems to have the most support from BBC sources, which is that Lucarotti massively disagreed with Tosh's script changes and requested that his name be withdrawn from the credits. The BBC declined this request, and so the story went out with Lucarotti's name on each episode, and with both he and Tosh being credited in the Bell of Doom, which is essentially what Loose Cannon did. This also ties up with the Radio Times listings. So, I mean, if it was listed that way in Radio Times, it stands to reason it would have been listed that way on the episode itself. The director for the story was Paddy Russell. This is the first of 4 Doctor Who directing credits for Paddy Russell, and she was the first female director of Doctor Who. Her other 3 Doctor Who stories are Invasion of the Dinosaurs, Pyramids of Mars, and Horror of Fang Rock. Though if you remember our discussion for The Edge of Destruction, you will know that she was originally asked to direct that story, but time commitments just didn't allow it.
Those stories that she has done are I think they're some of the best Doctor Who stories from the eras of those particular doctors. So Invasion is John Pertwee, Pyramids, which is one that I tell everyone to watch, and Fang are Tom. So it's nice to actually kind of see directors go across generations with the various doctors.
Yeah, definitely. In relation to this doctor and this story, she noted in a DVD documentary that this was the first time William Hartnell had worked with a female director, and that he found the whole experience to be a little bit bizarre, but that she was actually surprised that they got along really, really well. However, she did also comment that he was having a lovely time arguing with John Wiles, so maybe he was distracted by John Wiles and didn't really care about him so much. It was Paddy Russell, though, who really coached the Doctor when he was playing the Abbot, that the Abbot should be portrayed as a separate character and there should be no trace of the Doctor. And so that was her sort of coaching him through that performance.
Yeah, because like the only other time we've ever seen William Hartnell play other people so far is he played the duplicate Doctor, or the robot Doctor from The Chase, and then he had like that quick cameo at the episode 7 of The Master Plan where he plays like the Arabian expert.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
No.
Let's not talk about episode 7. Let's move on from episode 7.
Sadly, Paddy Russell passed away in 2017. Similar to Marco Polo and Mission to the Unknown, not only is the Massacre a missing story, but all of its episodes are missing. Also, there were no telesnaps taken either, unlike in Marco Polo. Like, Marco Polo for a missing story is fairly well documented because Waris Hussein loved the idea of having telesnaps and he kept his own personal collection and all this kind of stuff. John Wiles was not that type of person. He didn't pay for telesnaps to be taken. So the only visual reference that exists is actually promotional shots for the show, often which don't provide any real context. So again, if you've actually watched the loose cannon recreation, they did an amazing job with no baseline.
Yeah. And like there's so much, like the montage I mentioned in the summary, so that's the background for the montage is the massacre painting by a guy called Francois Dubois, and it's one of those horrible old style kind of paintings that depict violence in that really kind of graphic, unsettling way. And what they did was they just superimposed the pictures of the various characters that died over it, and it's done to the backdrop of like screams and anarchy and blood and that kind of stuff. It was very unsettling and it was very well done.
Yeah, I'll probably speak to that in my overall later on.
Yeah, so again, for no baseline, that's a really, really unsettling ending.
Yeah, definitely. The full title of this story, The Massacre of St. Bartholomew's Eve, is technically a bit of a misnomer because said massacre actually took place on St. Bartholomew's Day, not on the evening before it. But that was just a stylistic writing choice. According to the book Doctor Who Companions, at the end of this story, there was meant to be an amazing cameo that would have made me entirely happy, which is that William Russell and Jacqueline Hill were meant to come back as Ian and Barbara at the end of this story. The scene, which was scheduled to be filmed, but was cancelled and never actually got filmed, had Ian and Barbara witnessing the dematerialization of the TARDIS when Dodo enters. They didn't film it, and it really pisses me off.
Just the two of them going, nope, not again, not again. We love you, but not again.
I think it'd be nice, though. It really bothers me, though, that we didn't get to see that.
It would have been cool.
Yeah.
I'm going to blame John Wiles for that one again.
Yeah, so am I. So, on to our cast. So, as the Abbot, we have William Hartnell.
Shocker.
Yeah. So, unlike in The Chase, where Hartnell only played the robot doctor for some of the shots and we had a second actor playing him for the rest, William Hartnell is the only actor playing the Abbot. No one else plays that part. He is credited as Doctor Who for War of God and Bell of Doom, and as Abbot of Amboise for The Sea Beggar and Priest of Death. So when you think of it that way, there's 2 episodes, or the only 2 episodes of the series in which no actor is credited as the Doctor. Because even Mission to the Unknown, which he wasn't in,
he's credited
as Doctor Who William Hartnell. But they didn't include him twice in the credits because reasons, I suppose. So this is the only story where there's no credited Doctor listed.
So, you know the way, like, this is going to sound like a really weird tangent, but you know the way, like, for games like Skyrim and all that kind of stuff, people have done, like, mods of, like Thomas the Tank Engine as a dragon or this type of thing.
Yeah.
Every time you say War of God, or I've said War of God, I've thought of God of War. So can someone that's good at modding please redo all the God of War franchise with William Hartnell's Doctor as Kratos?
Or just fan art works as well. That works.
Absolutely. And just have him say boy constantly.
So Anne is played by Annette Robertson. This is the only Doctor Who acting credit for Annette. She was actually considered to become a main companion, but it was deemed that she'd have the same issues that Katarina had, where her origin and history wouldn't help the viewers identify with her and too much would have to be explained. Which I still think is stupid. Anyway. Annette's other acting credits include Shroud for a Nightingale, Couples, and Coronation Street. Interestingly, Annette was married to John Hurt from 1962 to 1964. So this is another Doctor Who couple pre-show, because we previously said that
Jean Marsh
was married to John Pertwee. So, keep it all in the family.
Yep.
Nicholas is played by David Weston. This is the first of 2 appearances for David. We will see him again in Warrior's Gate. His other acting credits include The Spread of the Eagle, Heiress of Garth, The Magical World of Disney, and our bingo ticket for the day,
Z-Cars.
Very good. Gaston is played by Eric Thompson, who some may know as the husband of Phyllida Law and the father of Emma Thompson, the actress.
Oh.
This is his only Doctor Who appearance, which is sad because I thought he was really cool.
Yeah.
His other acting credits include The Magic Ball, Coronation Street, and again, Z-Cars. He's best known, though, for rewriting and narrating The Magic Roundabout for its English release, which is such a messed up program when you look back on it as an adult. It's brilliant, but like...
A lot of shows are messed up when you look back at them as an adult. Also, throughout the entire summary, all I could think of was, no one fights like Gaston. No one hates those goddamn Catholics quite like Gaston.
Oh, Jesus.
I was like, sorry, the character, like, he's really, really anti-Catholic.
He really is, and we'll get to that in a bit.
Yeah.
I was just thinking on the Magic Roundabout, actually, and the 2 programs that always come to mind together for me are the Magic Roundabout and the Clangers.
Oh, God.
Both programs that are just like so mental and off the wall. Anyway, back to Eric Thompson. Yeah. Eric sadly passed away in 1982. Simon is played by John Tillinger. Again, this is the only Doctor Who acting credit for John. His other acting credits include Another World, The Addams Chronicles, and Hit and Run. Roger is played by Christopher Tranchell. This is the first of 3 appearances for Christopher. We'll see him again in The Faceless Ones and The Invasion of Time. His other acting credits include Out of the Unknown, The Bill, Z-Cars, The New Avengers, and Churchill's People.
So not quite the other bingo ticket, which is the Avengers, but this is the New Avengers.
This is the New Avengers, yeah. Marshall Tavanis, is that how we're pronouncing his name?
I think it's Tavania. I think that's how it's pronounced.
Oh, Tavania, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, Marshall Tavania is played by Andre Morel. This is his only Doctor Who acting credit. He's probably best known in television for his role as Professor Bernard Quatermass in the 1958 BBC television series Quatermass in the Pit. And the cinema, he's known for playing Dr. Watson alongside Peter Cushing's Sherlock Holmes in the Hammer Horror 1958 adaptation of The Hound of the Baskervilles. His other acting credits include a very long list. So, The Bridge on the River Kwai, Ben-Hur, The Slipper and the Rose, The Plague of the Zombies, The Mummy's Shroud, The Vengeance of She, and the 1978 animated version of The Lord of the Rings, where he played Elrond.
I've seen bits of that, and it's weird because like they've rotoscoped like all the orcs and things like that, so the animation style is very strange. Also,
it's very strange.
John Hurt was in it as well. John Hurt was in it.
Yes, he was. The 1978 animated version of Lord of the Rings is very strange. Good, but strange. Andre passed away in 1978. The Queen Mother is played by Catherine de Medici. No, the Queen Mother is Catherine de Medici. That's not again.
Yeah.
The Queen Mother. Yeah, Jesus Christ. The Queen Mother, Catherine de Medici, is played by Joan Young. This is Joan's only appearance in Doctor Who once again. Her other acting credits include Anne of Green Gables, Johnny You're Wanted, The Grove Family, Dixon of Dock Green, Z Cars Again, and All Creatures Great and Small. Joan passed away in 1984. 3 characters to go. Cool. Admiral de Coligny is played by Leonard Sachs. This is the first of 2 Doctor Who appearances for Leonard. We'll see him again in Arc of Infinity. He was also considered for the role of Marcus Scarman in Pyramids of Mars. I'm guessing because Paddy remembered him from this one, she considered him for that one as well.
And I thought he was really good in this story.
He was. His other acting credits include Out of the Past, Coronation Street, Quick Before They Catch Us, The Adventures of Sir Lancelot, and The Adventures of Robin Hood. Leonard passed away back in 1990. The King is played by Barry Justice. Again, only Doctor Who acting credit for Barry. His other credits include Emergency Ward 10, David Copperfield, The Doctors, and The Pallisers. Barry passed away in 1980. Lastly, we have Jackie Lane as Dodo. As we've done with other companions coming onto the TARDIS, we'll discuss Jackie in more detail next week when we see her actually have a starting episode of the show.
And just, I said this to Trish during the week, I came across one of the most unusual bits of trivia in relation to character or actors in Doctor Who, and for some reason it just makes me smile an awful lot. So I didn't peg it until I watched a later story, but there's an actor in this and in the Daleks Master Plan called Hugh Cecily. Now, I know Hugh from Dad's Army. He was a background platoon member, but weirdly enough, he's also one of the partygoers in the Rocky Horror Picture Show. For some reason, that piece of trivia just constantly sticks in my head.
Well, you know, Doctor Who, Time Warp. You know.
Yeah, exactly. There we go. It's just a jump to the left.
Actually, this is the last piece of random nonsense. I don't know if you've seen it, but there's 2 sisters on YouTube who've been making videos for donkey's years called Hillywood Productions. So Hollywood, but with an I instead of an O. Mm-hmm. And they do parodies of songs with, you know, pop culture things in them. So they did like Shake It Off by Taylor Swift, but it's the characters from Supernatural. They also did the Ghostbusters song as the characters from Supernatural. They did one of Sherlock. They did one for Deathly Hallows Part 2. But they did a version of Time Warp as the cast of Doctor Who.
I need to watch that. Around
the time of Runaway Bride, I want to say. So it's around like the 3rd or 4th season. It's really, really funny. Just on a complete tangent.
It's 3rd season because it's David Tennant's 2nd season, but that's 3rd season.
Well, yeah, but I mean, when they filmed, it was around the 3rd or 4th season. I don't know exactly.
Okay, gotcha. Now, yes, we're going to look that up after we finish this episode. So we've gone through the story summary, we've gone through the trivia, so now it's time for the discussion. Now, as this is a historical story, and it contains some people from history who actually existed, we're going to break this out again. So we're going to have the Doctor, the companions, the villains, and then a little bit on the historical figures who appear in the story. Yeah.
So, Paddy, I'll start you off. What did you think of the Doctor?
I've been waiting ever since I've watched this, I've been waiting to say this. Doctor Who? More like Doctor Where. Am I right? Ah! Yes, that's right, I'm doing finger guns and everything, so fuck all y'all. So, honestly, there's not a whole lot to say about the Doctor in the story. There's not. Except for that amazing monologue at the end. It's so heartbreaking. He goes on about like the sense of loss and kind of almost you get a sense of abandonment, because he talks about like Stephen not comprehending, and then he leaves, and then he goes about and Vicky and Ian and Barbara and then Susan, and it's like I think that this is a kind of I would like to believe that this scene was very cathartic for William Hartnell, because as we documented before, like William Hartnell was very upset and annoyed that William Russell and Jacqueline
Jacqueline
Hill. Yeah, sorry. I couldn't remember her last name for a second. I was like, Jacqueline Wright? No. Barbara Hill. That they left the show. And obviously he was very fond of Caroline Ford, which is another well-documented thing. And his relationship with Maureen O'Brien as well, from what I understand, was pretty good.
Yeah, they had a really good working relationship. Maureen has said that, like, before, because they used to film at like 7 p.m. It was sort of like this very sort of stage production-esque. That's the way it was done back in the, even like up into the 70s, they were still doing it that way.
Yeah.
And so she didn't mention if William Russell did it. I imagine he did, but she did mention that herself and Jacqueline Hill used to go into William Hartnell's dressing room, and they'd all have a glass of wine or a glass of something just before they started, as a sort of coming together before the show started. I think is a lovely idea, that them just like sitting down, having a friendly drink, and then going off and filming.
And as well, like as we kind of said on the podcast as well, but like if anyone watches the 50th anniversary documentary, which we will probably review at some stage well into the future, he was also very close to a lot of the production staff, so like Verity and Waris Hussein and I think Mervyn Pinfield as well. And like when you're the lead in a show and there's this unfortunate revolving door of people coming in and out of your life and you get attached to them, it is upsetting. So I'd like to believe that he channeled that into the scene. And I think that's one of the good things about Hartnell, is that the story could be absolute cack, but he will carry it. Or he will only appear in a short amount of time, but when he's there, he nails it. And this is one of those times.
Yeah, so like, again, you know, there's not a whole lot to say about the Doctor, which I thought, but now that I look at my notes, I have like 8 different bullet points, so maybe maybe there's more to say about him than I thought. So I was going to go down through these line by line. So first of all, right, we've mentioned this before, but I love it because it keeps coming up. The Doctor and his need to dress for every occasion is fabulous. None of the like, Troughton cares a little bit, but like, particularly when you get to like Pertwee and beyond, none of them change their clothing. Do you know, like, if you think about, you know, Modern Who and like Fires of Pompeii, brilliant episode.
Yeah.
David Tennant's wandering around in his suit. You know, they don't try to blend in, but he just wants to blend in. I'm convinced that he just likes dressing up. He's like, you know, a medren, like a medieval reenactor person who just like is like, I get to get out my cosplay. Sweet! I have a perfect costume for this. I'm back in a minute. And he just runs off.
Interesting that you pick Fires of Pompeii, because I think this story is like the classic version of Fires of Pompeii, or Fires of Pompeii. That
could be why I thought of it.
Yeah.
One of the things as well is that, like, I have to laugh because it comes true so well, and we'll talk about it in a second. We'll talk about Stephen, but I love his concern for Stephen outing himself as not being from that time period. As in, he's tempted to even skip visiting the man he wanted to see because he can't leave Stephen alone without locking him in the TARDIS for his own good. I'm just like, you see Stephen the same way I do. That's brilliant. Yeah. It's great to see his love of science and its history. That scene with the
Preslin.
With Preslin, yeah. I love that because, again, you sort of see that this is why the Doctor travels. You know, in future, I know that we find out more about Gallifrey, we find out more about his past and stuff like that. But this really goes back to why the Doctor travels and why he gets so much fun about it. He's an observer of history, and the idea that he gets to interact with someone from history and discuss notes with them or inspire them, like that's, you know, that's the sort of thing that this Doctor lives for. I think it's brilliant. But it also has the downside, which is that you need to preserve the course of history. And this is where this story really does mirror the Fires of Pompeii, because he makes the very tough choice of bundling Stephen back into the TARDIS, not even explaining, and just leaving.
Yeah.
And I think that says a lot of, it's not even just him preserving the course of history and not wanting to be witness to something like this. I think it says a lot about his understanding of Stephen.
Hmm.
Because while I've had my issues with Stephen as a character, we have said that Stephen can be incredibly protective.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And he was clearly very protective of Anne. And I think had they not left when they did, or had the Doctor explained why they were leaving, I think the Doctor had a very genuine concern that Stephen would have done something to get himself hurt or killed. And so the Doctor was like, actually, I'm not even going to give him the option. We're going to leave. I'll explain to him later.
No, absolutely. And like, we're not going to talk about too much about Fires of Pompeii because I don't want to give away too much of the story for like some of our listeners that are only introduced to Doctor Who through the podcast. But I have a headcanon now that this experience resonates for the Doctor during the Fires of Pompeii.
Yeah.
I know I get completely what you're saying, because like, if it had been, say, we bring it back, if it had been Barbara or if it had been Ian, they would know what the stakes were, and they wouldn't have been happy, but they would have gone into the TARDIS. Stephen,
Barbara would have probably figured it out before now.
Oh well, yeah.
When hearing mention of certain people's names and stuff like that, given the fact that like it's like for Stephen, this is something that happened not even just hundreds of years ago, but hundreds upon hundreds of years ago. So he doesn't know what's going on. Mm-hmm. But yeah, the bit at the end, the bit in the TARDIS when Stephen leaves, that was one of Hartnell's best, I think.
Yeah. He's
had a lot of really good monologues.
Mm-hmm.
You know, his one, I know he was talking to Susan, but it's essentially William doing a monologue. When Susan leaves, he's had a few other ones that have been absolutely amazing, but this one, like you said, it's so emotional and raw. Like, bawling doesn't even begin to describe it. Like,
because he's just defeated. That's all it is. It's just an air of defeat.
Yeah, and like the way he describes everyone as like, you know, they don't understand what it's like. But I think it's also the fact that like he knows they don't do it for the same reason he does.
Yeah.
You know, he travels through time knowing that there will be times when he has to say no. Mm-hmm. And you know, I think at this moment he's looking back and it's like, Susan, we don't know why Susan went with the Doctor. I have a few like headcanons as to why they went, but we don't know why they left. But, you know, she wanted to settle down. She didn't want to be jumping from place to place all the time, apparently. Ian and Barbara, while, you know, I have a funny feeling that every time the Doctor goes into a historical piece, he's sort of like, oh, Barbara would have loved this.
Yeah.
She would have loved this. But he also knows them well enough to know, yeah, she would have loved it, but they wanted to go down the pub and have a drink, and that was it. And, you know, Vicky, again, someone who he thought had the same wanderlust that he did, apparently didn't. So yeah, I think he's defeated and broken, and I think, you know, if you look at it from the modern lens of Doctor Who, and not even modern, but if you look at it from a more advanced, like future Doctors, that's the lonely god motif. Or, you know, think of Pyramids of Mars, you know, I walk in eternity.
Yeah.
You know, that's where a lot, like, people sometimes say, like, oh, like, Hartnell, you can write him off, people are bad. Like, it all starts with him.
Like, going back, I think, has given me, like, because William Hartnell was always within my top 5 Doctors. Going back has given me, and rewatching it for a more critical analysis, has given me like a such much more deeper appreciation of his version of the Doctor.
Yeah, we were discussing this the other day.
Yeah.
And I never really ranked William Hartnell in my Doctors. Like I've said before, that I kind of watched his stories for Ian and Barbara more so than for him when I originally watched it. But definitely now, I mean, he's my second, maybe third favorite, depending on my mood. That's of the Doctors I've watched, because bear in mind there's a few that I haven't seen.
And see, and again, like before we did this, like you were very when it came to certain doctors, you were very companion centric. So, for example, like your big kind of knowledge of John would be through Sarah Jane, the same way with Tom. To a smaller extent, maybe Leela later on, but and then obviously for William Hartnell, it's Ian and Barbara. So I think this is probably one of my favorite aspects of doing the podcast, is actually kind of getting you to see the new stuff and getting your reaction to it, or like stuff that's new to you as opposed to the new stuff.
Yeah. One of the things, though, that again, so we have this amazing emotional piece with the Doctor, which is brilliant, and I'm so gutted it didn't survive. So gutted. But now we get to the end, right? Stop fucking kidnapping people.
Well, like, okay, no.
It worked out well the first time, but it's not something you should be repeating.
No, but see, this is completely accidental. And, like, you're told, like, Stephen comes rushing in, and it's like, quick, take off, like, the cops are coming, they're going to use this thing, it's like, oh shit, go. And then it's like, shite. Is that really kidnapping?
Yes, it is.
But there's no real intent behind this. Is it like
it doesn't matter.
All right, fair enough.
Malicious intent isn't a necessity. But I have a concern at the end of this, though, which is Dodo reminds him of Susan. And I wonder if that's going to be a challenging thing going forward, given the fact that he has just essentially, he was a broken man, and then this young woman enters who has a similar hairstyle to Susan, and who he even comments, Stephen, doesn't she remind you of Susan? Forgetting the fact that Stephen never met Susan in the first place.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I'm really interested to see how his dynamic with Dodo works, because given the emotional state he was in, I don't want him literally treating Dodo as if she's Susan.
Yeah, because it gets very kind of weird then, because like Stephen wakes up to see the Doctor giving him a haircut to replicate Ian's hairstyle. There's like there's a mop wearing one of Susan or Barbara's cardigans. It just gets very strange.
That cardigan wouldn't last very long anyway.
No, it wouldn't. Bite the cardigan.
Yeah, so for a story that the Doctor isn't in very much, I noticed quite a lot about his character.
Yeah. But it all comes from like that last however long, like that last, well, with the exception of his like amazing fashion sense, it all comes from like those last 10-15 minutes.
Yeah, I think it's his scene with the I keep forgetting his name.
Preslin.
Yeah. His scene with him, and then the scenes at the end.
Yeah.
But I think you find out so much about the Doctors in those few minutes. I won't say it doesn't matter that the Doctor isn't in the rest of it, but it still shows, like you said, it doesn't matter how much of it he's in, Hartnell delivers 150%. He's fucking brilliant.
Oh yeah.
Love him. So, moving on to our companions. So, we have Stephen.
Yes. So, I'm going to let you lead on to Stephen this one. Yeah.
He is complaining from the first fucking line. Like, and then the fact that he's like, I can take care of myself, but he doesn't know that you have to pay or how to do so. And then he gets like all uppity because like, oh, he won't take my money. It's like, from what I understand, it's like as if someone went into a pub, bought a pint, and tried to pay with a €500 note.
Pretty much.
I was like, no one can break a €500 note. I used to work in a shop. Someone tried to pay with a €500 note. My manager told me, no, give them a credit note and they can come back and pay tomorrow.
Yeah.
Like, you can't take money of a certain size. So, like, the fact that he's like, I can take care of myself, clearly can't. The thing, though, about this is that Stephen fumbles from scene to scene. And he is so clearly incapable of surviving by himself. One of the things that we've discussed a lot in previous episodes, and this isn't just us going on about how much I love Ian and Barbara, but because it was the same with Vicky, that the companions up to now, when you dropped them in historical circumstances, they adapted fairly well.
Yeah.
Do you know? And maybe it's because Barbara was a history teacher. Ian is friends with a history teacher. Whatever the case may be. But Stephen just bumbles from one room to another, saying shit he shouldn't, doing shit he shouldn't. And he's so brash the whole time. Like, every line he says, it's as if it's meant to be intimidating. And I'm like, dude, rein it the fuck in. And I don't know if that was a Peter Purves thing, or if that was a character, this is the way the character is going to be type of thing. But I don't like it, whichever one it was. Because it makes his character incredibly difficult to like. He also displays what I would term a special kind of dumb.
Why?
On several occasions, right? But one in particular. These people don't trust you. Why would they? You can barely fucking string a sentence together.
Don't go rooting around in their presses and drawers. I find,
Don't go rooting through their shit. Like, oh, I need to speak to this person. Okay, I'll go get him for you. Actually, I'll leave him a note while you're going. Where the fuck is the logic in that? Of course someone comes in and is like, why are you rooting through his things? Bearing in mind that Nicholas is charged with protecting the Admiral.
Yep.
And Stephen, they think, is working with the abbot, if nothing else.
Yeah.
And they're like, what? Like, oh, he's just a special kind of dumb. However, there is one or two nice things about him. Okay, it's the one nice thing, but it comes up twice, right? Which is his protective streak. So, I've said this before, Stephen, though I have issues with him as a character, he is very protective. Mm-hmm. Sometimes too much, but it comes, I think, from a good place.
Yep.
Do you know? I'll give him the benefit of that. And so, we really see that in his interactions with Anne. From the moment he first meets her, he's concerned about her because she looks scared out of her fucking wits. And later on, when he's convinced that she has died in this massacre because the doctor just sent her back to wherever she fucking lived before, he tries to force the responsibility of her death onto the doctor, which is an unfair thing to do, but it's an understandable reaction. So I'd kind of put it as a positive for Stephen as a character, because it just shows how much he cares about other people when you put aside all of his brashness and ego and everything else. He does care about other people a great deal, which I have to keep reminding myself when he does stupidly dumb things. Like, for example, wandering out of the TARDIS, just being like, no, I don't want to be here anymore, I'm going to leave. And like, I laughed, like, because I wondered if Hartnell was being sarcastic when he said it. And he's like, at least he's learned something. At least he checked the scanner before he left. And like, if that's the highest level of praise you have for this guy, then you just reinforce my belief that he's thick as a fucking plank. Where the highest level of praise you have is, at least he checked the scanner before he went outside.
Yeah.
That's the only thing he learned from you. Was to look before you leap. Or at least glance before you leap. So yeah, he wants off. He leaves in a strop. Fine. It's an understandable strop. Except that he comes running back in like 2 minutes later. And apparently all is forgotten.
Like, see, this is the thing now, is that about his leaving. And it's like, okay, after everything he witnessed, like, in terms of, the Daleks' master plan. Okay, you lose two people that you're traveling with, and then you come to the massacre, and like another person you become friends with has
Three
to be
people.
And
Brett.
and more so than anyone. Oh yeah, sorry, Brett. Well, he didn't see Brett die. Put it that way.
Doesn't matter.
Okay, yeah, fair enough.
I will never forget Brett.
No, Brett was awesome. So like, yeah, no, it's you can't really blame him for wanting to leave, because like if this is the price of having to travel, I'm not sure it's a price I want to pay. But that being said, after the Time Meddler, I'm pretty sure Vicky and the Doctor would have sat him down to kind of say, look, this is the rules of traveling through history. We can't You absolutely can't. So his whole, lambasting of the Doctor then is that you kind of wonder, is that was a heat of the moment, or is this just his legitimate thoughts, like that, you're a bad person for leaving this person behind, even though you told me that I have to.
I think it's lashing out. I think it's an understandable lashing out. Do you know, like I said, he's clearly hurt and he doesn't know what to do, so you lash out at the person closest to you. I think some of it is ignorance, though. Ignorance of how walking through time, there's rules, and he doesn't seem to care about that. But am I the only one who found it hilariously funny that he came back in? It's like, you have to leave. There are police coming. So, just lock the door.
Mm-hmm.
Just lock the door. What are they going to do?
If you were so kind of adamant about leaving, why not just stick your head in the door and say you might want to take off, the police are coming to use it?
Or if you hated him so much, why bother warning him of anything? Also, where did Stephen go? So Stephen wanders off in a strop. The Doctor has his emotional moment. Dodo comes in and they have their conversation. And then Stephen comes running back in because he sees two policemen walking. Are they just walking in the direction of the TARDIS? Is he assuming what they're going to do? And even if they were, again, we said don't mention episode 7 of the Daleks Master Plan, but episode 7 of the Daleks Master Plan, the police didn't give a monkeys about the box.
Yeah.
Like, what if they try to, put it on a truck and take it away somewhere? Cool, the Doctor will leave when he's good and ready. I don't get what the fucking panic is about, Stephen. Other than the fact that, we don't want to actually write you out of the show, and that was a cheap cop-out.
Yeah. Fake. So, will we do the story-based and then our new arrival?
Mm-hmm.
Cool. So, while you are having your beverage...
Thank you.
Do you want to do Nicholas and Gaston, or will we do Anne first?
Nicholas and Gaston first, I think.
So for me, they're effectively two sides of the same coin, because they both have masters that they're incredibly loyal to.
Yes.
They're fiercely devout to their fellow Huguenots, or the people, like their fellow, I would say their fellow Frenchmen, but no, it's their fellow Huguenots due to the religious divide. Yes. Now Nicholas, when I say they're two sides of the same coin, that unites them, but Nicholas is definitely the more, I'd say, analytical and prefers the use of brain and diplomacy, whereas Gaston is a bit more quick-tempered and quick to the sword, so he'd be the brawn aspect of the side of things. I did enjoy both of them. I thought they were two fantastic parts, acted really, really well. And the fact that now I know that it's Emma Thompson's dad as Gaston still doesn't, it doesn't colour my perception, or doesn't change anything. But I will say that of the two of them dying, I think Nicholas's death was the one I was sadder at.
Yeah. Gaston is... he's a Gaston.
He really is.
He is surprisingly very similar to the Gaston from Beauty and the Beast, in the sense that he believes he's right.
Mm-hmm.
He, clicks his finger at people, which I fucking hate. I hate that. When you see that in movie, or even in reality, when someone wants to get a waiter's attention, so they're no, it's just rude. Gaston is very harsh, and his hatred of Catholics makes him blind to everything.
Do you know who he kind of reminds me of?
Who?
The Red Viper. Game of Thrones.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can see that. One of the things that I found slightly humorous at the time, and then I found it even more humorous in a sense when I looked up the trivia, was that, and I messaged you with this, the first time we hear Gaston speak, I paused and I was like, okay, this came out in the 60s, so this isn't who my brain is telling me it is. He sounded a lot like Kenneth Branagh. And I was like, he sounds so much like Kenneth Branagh. And then, of course, there's the utter weirdness of it, and the fact that he's Emma Thompson's dad.
Yeah.
And Emma Thompson and Kenneth Branagh were a thing back in the 90s. And I was just like, Okay, my brain's gone to like all these weird places. Rein it back in. I think Gaston is an interesting character to watch. He's a character you could very easily hate, but for some reason I don't.
And that's the thing. Like you're built up in these scenarios to. I think sometimes in these type of things you're built up to like members of both sides. Now, in this particular one, I don't think there was anyone on the Catholic side that I was particularly fond of.
No.
But with Gaston is the type of character that you're meant to, fuck this guy. No, I did enjoy his screen time, like, and the fact that he lets Stephen live, like he easily outmatches Stephen, and he disarms him, and he just goes, get out, and he gives him back his sword, and it's like, so you're not just a thug. Like there's a bit of
there's a certain level of,
I'd say, honor,
niceness to him.
Right, see, that's like he's like, sorry, go on.
He is very, like, he defends Anne at the beginning.
Yeah.
Do you know?
But is that just to kind of piss off the Cardinal's Guard more so than actual anything out of chivalry?
I wouldn't say he's chivalrous.
No. Well, except for letting Stephen live. That's the only thing that I can think of.
I think he just thinks Stephen's dumb. But, you know, I think with Anne, and even like the fact that, like, he acknowledges Stephen into the group and welcomes him in, and so, like, I think he's a nice person in general, but like I said, when it comes to his interactions with certain people, his hatred of them and of the religion that they observe blinds everything. As for Nicholas, I think he's a really nice man. He's very patient and kind. We see that from the outset, and I'm really glad that doesn't change at all. Yes, he starts to not trust Stephen, but he doesn't ever go as far as Gaston. And even when there's evidence against Stephen, he's like, okay, prove it to me, show me. He gives him the opportunity. So I love Nicholas. I thought Nicholas was a very nice character. Yeah. Pretty much everything you have to say about him you can tell in the first 5 seconds, but sometimes it's nice just to have a nice person around.
And I suppose that brings us on to Anne.
Yeah, I have a weird thing about Anne, because most of my comments about Anne are to do with her interactions with Stephen. And that's probably doing her a bit of a disservice, because going back, she's incredibly brave.
Yeah.
What she does at the beginning, how she's introduced into the story, she is incredibly brave. However, all that I can remember from her is her interactions with Stephen. And at first, I was like, she has a good read on Stephen, that Stephen is fundamentally a nice person and a caring person, and that he's not trying to trick them or anything like that. And she sort of reads that on him fairly quickly. But then she becomes slightly obsessed with him. You were the first person who was ever nice to me. I was like, okay, creepy. You're being creepy. And like, she just latches on to Stephen and is like, I'll go with you. Let's leave Paris. I'm like, first of all, he's thick as a plank. Why would you want to go anywhere with him?
I think the reason that she attaches herself to him so much is that he's the only one that doesn't treat her like a chess piece or some sort of pawn, right? Yeah, but which is also a chess piece. But no, he doesn't treat her as anything less than human. And
that's fine.
Yeah,
that's a nice reason. She gets a good read on him. But by the end of the story, she is so devoted to him, purely based on that it sort of makes me feel for her as a person that, like, she has nobody else in her life who's ever been nice to her. That's slightly concerning. But also, like, she acknowledges it herself that he clearly has no fucking clue what he's doing. If anyone's going to be the leader if those two were stranded there, right? The leader of the two of them would be Anne. Because Stephen is as thick as a plank.
I think there's a small bit of maybe kind of moon-eyed thing over it, is that Like, so it's there's no hiding the fact that Stephen is English in this.
Yeah.
And so,
Which Stephen isn't. I don't know if Stephen's meant to be English when we first meet him.
no, I think
Because he's from space.
I think he is. I think he's meant to be English.
Okay.
And so, like, so he is English. He's nothing but English. Now we know that and he keeps saying, "Oh, I'm a traveler. I travel around the place." So maybe it's a thing of, he's nice to me. He saved me. He's going to go. Maybe he might take me with him. Maybe I might get out of my, to kind of steal a line from. It was at this quiet provincial life, you know. That's the thing that I think that she latches onto Stephen.
Yeah, I just think it's a wrong person to latch on to.
I have to ask you a question, okay?
Yeah.
She gets left behind.
Mm-hmm.
Now, is that due to the dictates of traveling through time, or I don't want to have another Katerina, or I don't want to have the fate of another Katerina?
So you think the Doctor didn't bring her with him because
he didn't want her to end up the same way that Katerina did?
No, I don't think that's it.
Yeah, no, but that's a question that came up. Like, I was like, no, it's purely down to
like,
this.
I don't get how that's even a question, to be honest, because that's literally answered at the end of the episode.
Yeah,
because he takes Dodo. So
yeah. Oh, I know, but I see, like, before. No, that isn't the whole kind of thing of the story dictates, but it's like, oh no, you can save this person because, like, after all, like, you saved Katerina. Like, she was fated to die in Troy. It was like, I think that it's a case of, no, we're not fucking up with time anymore in this regards. She has to stay.
Again, I don't read it that way. Partially because, how to put it, the Doctor didn't choose to save Katerina. Katerina was helping him with Stephen.
Yeah.
You know, it was a practical thing at the time.
He could really go, thanks, fuck off, and I'll just boot her out.
Yeah, exactly. And, you know, clearly Vicky had trusted Katerina and stuff like that. I think him leaving Anne behind here is that the difference between Anne and Katerina is Katerina came from a myth.
Yeah. It's the advancement of time, I think.
Yeah, whereas Anne came from an actual event. And also, I mean, the Doctor doesn't know her at all. And, you know, he doesn't know the ramifications that taking her out of time would have. So yeah, I didn't see it that way. I didn't read the situation that way at all. I didn't even think of it, to be honest. So maybe that's why they did it, but
it was just like, it was just a thought that came into my head. It was like, you know, well, like, no, it's like, this is one of those things, and I actually kind of had it for Stephen as well. Like, you know, my note was, welcome to traveling through fixed points in time. Shit has to happen. And that's why, like, I was like, no, like, he said, no, we can't save her. And, or we can't bring her with us, or whatever the case is. And it's because Anne is a young girl and she's a servant, and like, there could be comparisons, and no, there is comparisons to Katerina in the sense of the background and like who the character is, and like, there be an argument made for that's the reason that he didn't pick her. But I would again be like you and say, no, it's look, it's not situational. Like, we're far away from things. She has a family that she can go to. You can stay there. We have to leave right now. We can't take her with us.
Yeah, also, Troy was under attack at the time.
Do
you know? So, like, there's differences. Yeah, I didn't see it that same way. Now that we talk about it, I understand what you mean, but the thought didn't even enter my mind, to be honest.
There's not a whole lot to say about Dodo, because we only get, like, 2-3 minutes with her?
Yeah, another orphan, though.
Well, yeah, because, like, she says she has no close family.
Yeah.
Well, like, implying that, like, she could still have family, but orphan in that sense, as opposed to absolutely having fucking no one. She is another orphan. What is it with the Doctor?
Orphan by definition of an orphan, mate.
You knew what I meant. Shush.
So we have another orphan. She has absolutely no fear of her kidnapper. That is what he is. Or this weird machine that she's in. One thing I do love about her is she does remind me of Donna in a way.
Yeah, oh yeah.
because, you know, Stephen loses his fucking shit, which I think we'll talk about more next time, but you could be going anywhere or anywhen, and her response is like, so what, like?
Like
I love it.
all that was going through my head was like, is like Stephen kind of going, was this what I was like when I came on board? Yes, but less charismatic.
Yeah, but like, she literally has no fear, and already, like, in only, 2 minutes, she has way more personality than Katarina ever fucking had.
Yeah.
So far, I like her. I'm interested. I'm very interested to see her dynamic with Stephen, because, again, not to beat a dead horse on this, but Jesus, like, what are you doing here? You could be going anywhere. It's like, says the man who stumbled into the machine when he was, like, dying, and then was like, oh, I didn't realise where I was.
And then proceeded to tackle a guy for no reason, other than he just wouldn't.
Exactly. But yeah, no, I think she's interesting. I'm looking forward to seeing more from her.
So the villains of the piece in this week that I've put down anyway are, because there's a lot of historical figures in this, but the villains that I've put down were the Abbot and then Simon and Roger.
I had a different read on this, so okay. I didn't see the Abbot as a villain at all, and we can talk about that in a little second. But I actually moved the Marshal into my primary villain slot.
Okay.
The way we've done this in the past is we've only discussed the historical characters outside of the historical character bucket if we felt that they contributed in a companion or villain capacity significantly.
Yeah.
And I think the Marshal does.
I get that. I do. I see, but this is the thing. This is such a confusing story in terms of Doctor Who. I think I'll put that into my overall. So, who did you have as the villains?
Marshal Tavannes, Simon and Roger, just because they're the sort of henchmen. Mm-hmm. And then I was tempted to move up the Queen Mother. Mm-hmm. But that really only comes in at the end, so I didn't bother.
Cool. So how about we do this? I discuss the Abbot, and you can chime in if you want. We then go on to Simon and Roger, because we both have notes on them. And then we lead into Marshal Tavannes, because he's my first on the list of historical figures, but he's also your primary villain.
Yeah.
Cool. So with the Abbot, he comes across as he's more bark than bite. That's the way that and I think there was a huge missed opportunity here for, if he gets wind, I would have loved to have seen him kind of get wind that Stephen thinks that he's someone else, and then try and do like a kind of a Nebula endgame type thing on it, where it's like, oh, you think I'm this travelling companion of yours? Well, I might try and string you along. And like, it's not as if like William Hartnell was aware or anything like that, or he was on holidays, because he's playing both characters. So I don't know. Like, there was no impact by the Abbot, yet he's this constant presence for like 3 episodes.
My thing with the Abbot, and the reason why because originally, the way this usually works is Paddy usually watches the episodes before me, and he's watched them before. I will briefly look at the headings in Paddy's notes to see who are the key characters that Paddy has picked out. So I'll pay close attention to them, and I can add others if I see the need. So you had written down the Abbot, so I was paying close attention to the Abbot. Anyway, I think the Abbot was just a crock of shit.
Yeah, it's
right?
like...
The original plot was clearly that the Doctor goes undercover as the Abbot. That was clearly what it was fucking meant to be. And they didn't do that.
No.
So the whole character of the Abbot is a complete fucking write-off, because the things that he does, and even like the Marshal Tavannes calls out the fact that like the Abbot seems to be actively fucking up their plans, which doesn't make sense if he's not the Doctor, because him fucking things up, it just seems inconsequential in that regard. So I just see him in context of the story that we were given. The Abbot is an intimidating presence, but ultimately nothing.
Was like,
that's it.
It almost felt like that they were trying to do, like they were trying to be a bit more clever and do the Reign of Terror, where he's the governor of the southern provinces. But at least then we got to see him play the part while also kind of tipping the wink to the camera, kind of saying like, no, I am the Doctor. Whereas like this, it's like, okay, we're not seeing any alone time by him interacting with other characters. Or if we are, we're not seeing him after the fact kind of going, whew, that was a close one. So, like, do you know he's a villain? He used up valuable airtime. That's why he's a villain.
But we got to see Hartnell play somebody else.
We did. We got to see mean old gruff William Hartnell play a mean old gruffer. Yeah. Yeah.
It's different. They're different. The Paddy Russell made sure they were different.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, that's for me though is why he's not a villain, because he's barely a character.
But again, like, how many times have we, like, I mean, we did the Space Museum. We had Lobos, and we had, like, the security commander. They're barely fucking, like, as like I think the chief villain of that story was the whole thing of, you know, predestination and fighting the future. But because
true, but the abbot doesn't actually do anything, whereas those two people actually tried to do things. They were just shit at it.
Yeah, exactly. Cool. So Simon and Roger.
Yeah, so Simon and Roger, for me, they sort of fall into the stereotypical henchman roles that you see.
Yeah.
You have the super competent one and the kind of shy, less competent one who is still a henchman and who does still follow the same ethos, but he's not the sharpest tool in the shed. You know, he kind of bumbles along.
I would put them as Simon is an attack dog and Roger is a lackey.
Yeah, I think that's a good comparison. Yeah. One thing about Roger, though, I said he's not the sharpest tool in the shed.
No.
He has a very good visual memory, though. Which could be why they keep him around.
Oh, God. The sun was setting. It was cold. There was dew on the ground. I remember this much.
As for Simon, though, Simon, I think was probably written this way, is the mirror image of Gaston.
Absolutely. And I honestly think that they're both kind of mirror images of Gaston and Nicholas, because, like, Simon relishes the concept of going beyond the initial plan and just slaughtering every Huguenot he can get his hands on.
Yeah. And
had Roger been around, I think Roger would be more like Tavernier and that sort of have that reluctance of, like, why not just kill the people we're meant to kill and everything else would fall into line.
Yeah. Like, I don't think Simon minded that there was no list at the end.
Yeah, no, exactly. Like, because he was like, oh, thank God, we'll get rid of all of them. And I'm like, okay, no, that also, like, that final, like, the final 5 minutes into the build up to the massacre montage, it's incredibly unsettling.
Yeah.
And we've seen, like, you know, the last kind of big intrigue show, you know, say the last decade was probably Game of Thrones in terms of, like, you know, the Red Wedding and the various weddings and all this, and, like, all the backstabby intrigues and stuff like that. I'd put that 5 minute section or even the whole build up against the entire run of that show, because it was so well done and I was really, really unsettled by some of the characters.
The thing about Simon that I have down here is that because, again, none of the footage survives, so again, thank you, Loose Cannon, great job as always. It sounds like he's sneering the whole time.
Mm-hmm.
This guy is as subtle as a brick to the face.
Yep.
And so you're not surprised when he's like, oh, thank God I don't have to use a list. It doesn't surprise you in the slightest. It's not meant to surprise you. He's not meant to be a complex character. Like you said, he's an attack dog.
Yeah.
And that's what he does.
No, most dogs have a master. So how about we move on to the master of this particular attack dog, and we discuss your primary villain and my first historical figure, Marshal Tavernier.
Yeah, so the reason why I have him down as the primary villain is because he is the guy who holds Simon's leash.
Yes.
Right? He is incredibly mistrustful. Like, he sees shadows where there is no sun.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he is so mistrustful, constantly scheming. And again, you sort of see it in that he serves the Queen Mother. Sorry, Paddy was making funny voices. He serves the Queen Mother, not the king.
Yep.
He has his own agenda. And the fact that he was orchestrating to kill the Admiral from the off. Do you know? The minute Anne comes in, we hear that something about, she heard something about, like, it'll be like this all over again and stuff like that. So, like, he's been planning this well in advance. This wasn't a reactive thing to anything that happened in the story. He's been doing this for a while. Yeah, he has some concern at the end about innocence, which is, you know, it's a nice foil for that character. Do you know what I mean? Because usually the main villain is a bit more like Simon. Do you know, a bit more, it doesn't matter, I'm going to kill everybody. And at least he feels for it at the end, but he still gives the order.
Yeah.
He still follows through. And he had a fucking list.
Mm-hmm.
The fact that he wrote a list in the first place of Huguenots, that he wanted to kill. The fact that he attacked and orchestrated the attack on the Admiral, who was a friend of the king, who, you know, was meant to be, you know, helping form this bridge between the two populaces, between the Catholics and the Protestants or whatever. He doesn't care. He has his schemes and the schemes of the Queen Mother, and he is perfectly willing to see them through, even when at the end he has a small little bit of remorse, but he still says, there's no list.
Yeah.
Do it.
And like that was the thing, was that like you were kind of hoping that like you'd put up a bit more defense. Now he knows which side his bread is buttered, like, so that's the thing. Like he's the fucking Marshal of France. Like he wants to stay that way, if not, you know, ascend higher. And like ultimately that's why he goes ahead with the plan. But it was nice to see that one fleeting moment of, like, if we just take care of this list, all the major opposition to our power is gone. Now we're just salting the earth. And then it's like, okay, so cool, just salt the earth.
Yeah, but the fact that he's still okay with it, though.
Oh, yeah.
Because if he wasn't, there is another option, which is walk away. And he doesn't do that. So that, for me, was why he was top of that totem pole. When we get to the historicals, we'll talk about the Queen Mother, but for me, for the entirety of the story, my primary villain was the Marshal.
Yeah. Oh, he's the guy that pulls all the strings. Like even the abbot, who was meant to be like this, like in theory, this person that's got the ear of the cardinal, who's like also like a representative of the Pope. Like he's over him. He's the one that's pulling all the strings, and like even then, you know, like, you know, he contemplates kind of standing up to the Queen Mother, but then it's like, you know what, I fucking like my lot in life. At the end of the day, these people, they're probably going to die anyway, because we're probably going to use them as fodder in some regards. So better to get it done now. And like you'd be kind of wondering, like, you know, through all very other famous like genocides in history, were there guys like him where it's like, well, why don't we just get rid of the people we're intending to get rid of? Well, why not get rid of all of them? Okay.
Yeah. He's an interesting look into a regime that would kill off
it's like
innocents and everyone else.
It's I suppose it's like that thing. It's amazing how fast you're okay with something when fear of your own life comes into effect. Yeah. So we'll now move into the historical figures proper, I suppose. The Queen Mother, Catherine de Medici. What a bitch.
Oh yeah. Oh, silent but powerful. I mean, bearing in mind she doesn't actually say anything until the last episode. Oh,
like she gets called out in a royal assembly or in a royal council meeting by the colony, and she just fucking pimp walks away. She doesn't throw her toys out of her pram. Like, do what she came across as a more competent Cersei.
I was thinking the same thing. She is who Cersei wants to be.
Yeah. Lay off the booze.
Do you know?
Yeah.
You know, the idea that she has this much power over people. She's one of those as well, again, in a very Cersei-like manner, who cannot give up their power when the younger steps up.
No.
She's the Queen Mother.
Yep.
She has no power whatsoever by law. And yet, she inspires this incredible loyalty in those around her. But also the fact that she undermines her son's authority.
I would say through fear rather than inspiration.
True, but still.
Yeah, inspires, yeah. But no, it's like that thing like where she just walks in and like the king has made a decision, and she's just like, no, this is the way it's going to be.
Yeah. There is one thing about her though, which is in a slightly messed up way. She has a reason behind her madness. It's not a good reason, but it's a reason. Which is she sees the Huguenots as a threat. As a threat to her son and to their livelihoods. And the fact that she's like, now they've married into the family. How long do you think they're going to let you live?
But this is the thing. She arranged for that marriage.
Yeah.
So was it just a
I don't know. I think she's an interesting character. Listen, you'd kind of maybe rank her as the overall villain, but the fact that she only says something in the last 10 minutes sort of took away from that a little bit.
But she does almost throw the whole thing away by having Henry killed. So the representative of all French Protestants that she married to her daughter, the one that could have broken the peace, she then decides to kind of, if we're going to kill them all, we might as well kill him as well. It's like, no, that is a really, really bad idea.
Yeah. That actually just reminded me of Simon was so bummed that he didn't get to kill him.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, that was no, you're the one that has to escort him safely from the city. So the next person on the list is Admiral de Coligny.
So I only have two notes about him, to be honest. The first, that he plays it very cool in private conversations.
Yep.
He clearly knows his own power and he knows, how to handle himself. On the flip side, though, he's a very passionate advocate when in council, which I'm guessing is kind of his job.
There's a serious game. There's a serious. You might even I know that it came later. But there's a serious Massacre vibes in Game of Thrones. Or there's a serious Game of Thrones vibe in Massacre. He's very much like Ned Stark in the sense of, he knows his position. He's the admiral of the Royal Navy. He doesn't want to ascend any higher. He's happy with his lot in life. His main thing now is just to stop the persecution of Huguenots, but he also, I suppose, wants to stop this whole persecution of Protestants across Europe because the Dutch are a small nation at that stage, and he wants the French to intercede on their behalf. I really liked him, and the painting by Francois Dubois, which is what the final scene of the loose cannon representation of the massacre is based on, it shows him being I think about to be thrown out of the window of his house. And this is a guy that he's a wounded man, and he's not even given the dignity of a last stand. And it's heartbreaking. That this man of strength at the end it's like a newborn babe type thing. Yeah. And also as well, to go back to that painting, it does show the Queen Mother investigating a pile of dead Protestants, and it's it's a very unsettling painting, and it added huge effect to the watching of this.
Yeah, we'll discuss that in a minute. I agree with you on the Admiral. I think he was a good character. I think he didn't deserve the outcome that he got. I have another character on my list. I don't know if you had on yours, which is the King.
Yeah, I've got the King.
Oh, you have the King.
Cool. Yeah.
I didn't remember copying it over from yours. My thing is that he's a fool, he's a petulant child, and he's a man of extremes.
Well, see, this is the thing now, right? And I put it down as because we don't really live in a world anymore. Well, not to my knowledge anyway, where monarchies are as all powerful as they once were. And so this is the dangers of the monarchy. So I obviously doing a bit of history. Charles was 10 when he ascended to the throne, and he is now 22 at the time of the massacre. And he is it's all about, come on, we'll go play tennis. Come on, let's go hunting. He's very much he's that peacocky king, and he's completely under the thumb of his mother, which is his reactions to everything. They try to kill the admiral. Fucking kill them all. Find out and kill. And it's okay, who are they all? You need to first of all do an investigation. You can't just go rounding up every fucking person willy-nilly to try and find it. He's very much hot-headed.
Yeah.
And even like he threatens to kill his mother, and it's like going, dude, you should know, if you're smart, you know that you don't have the power base to back that up.
Yeah, I think he just comes across as a petulant child.
Yeah.
You know, which makes sense in the historical context that you've explained.
But what the worst thing about him is that he's so up in arms over the colony being wounded that in the end he still signs his death warrant. He still gives his okay to the slaughter, like, and it's like, this is part of the reason I love Doctor Who, is that it tells, like, especially the historical stuff, it informs you about things that you would never have known due to like the localization of whatever history you're taught in schools, and it just kind of educates you on all these characters from history, and it's like, Jesus, like, now sometimes they're a small bit misrepresented, but it gives you the urge to actually go up and look about that person to see, was he really that bad.
Yeah, an interesting set of characters, to say the least.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's
It'll
see
be
how they
interesting to
impact us.
how they play into our overall scores.
Jinx, ha. So, we now come to the overall section where we'll give our scores, and I personally think that this will be a very interesting one to discuss. So, yeah. Tricia, I want to ask you a question, okay?
Go on.
Is this a Doctor Who story?
Yes. But in my opinion, not a good one. I get where your question is coming from, because the Doctor is barely fucking in it.
Mm-hmm.
But I consider Mission to the Unknown to be a Doctor Who story, and he's not in that at all.
Yeah. See, I'm in complete agreement with you, right? Is that if this is to be categorized as a Doctor Who story, which it actually is, it's not a great one. However, as a story, I think it's fucking incredible.
I didn't like it.
No?
No.
Okay, why didn't you like it?
I'll tell you one thing, right?
Right.
My first note here, right?
Yep.
Because usually I watch this, but like I'll watch it on one screen. I've got my notes on the other screen, right? My first note is, ooh, John Lucarotti. And I got really, really excited.
Yeah.
This isn't the story that he fucking wrote, though.
No, it's Donald
This story
Tosh.
is an absolute fucking clusterfuck. Is it a Doctor Who story, even though the Doctor isn't in most of it? Yes. It's a bad one, though, because they write around that so fucking terribly. It's so badly written. It's horrifically written. Like, you and I were talking about this a little bit during the week, because my score for this story has changed literally every day since I watched it, right? And again, it did change again while we were talking, which I knew it would.
Yeah.
In the first episode, we have it set up that Simon sees the Doctor and follows after him, because we find out later the Doctor looks like the Abbot.
Mm-hmm.
Where did Simon go? What did Simon do? That plotline goes fucking nowhere. Then we have the Doctor being escorted somewhere by some local child. Where the fuck did he go? What was he doing? Originally, clearly, he was meant to be taken to replace the Abbot. That was meant to be the fucking point. But they don't do that. So then the Doctor's gone for 2 fucking episodes. You've Stephen, who's as thick as a plank on the best of days, coming face to face with the Abbot and still being convinced it's the Doctor, which just makes him out to be fucking stupid, because it's not the Doctor at all. It's nothing like him other than it looks like him, which makes no fucking sense. And like, for me, it's just such a clusterfuck of disaster in terms of the writing. It makes no logical fucking sense. And even if you went like, oh, the Doctor being the Abbot was just a bit of fun, it's a bit of fun for the audience of, oh, wink wink, you thought we replaced him but we didn't. Where the fuck did he go? So they just gloss over wherever the hell he went. Where did he go? What did he do? Like, you can't just not explain it at all. I mean, in every other episode or every other story where the Doctor's not in it for a bit, they explain it, because usually Hartnell's on holidays, right? But they explain where he's gone. There's no explanation given. He just fucked off and never came back until the very end. So I think it's a really badly written story. The other thing that I don't like about it. And this is something that I didn't think it would bother me. So, full disclosure, Paddy messaged me before I watched the story saying, do we want to discuss the differences between the Catholics and the Protestants and that type of thing? And I said, look, if it comes up, it comes up. If it doesn't, it doesn't. Heads up, me and Paddy are from Ireland. We were raised Catholic, right? Neither of us are practicing at the moment, but we were raised Catholic. And I haven't been a practicing Catholic since I was 12, if I'm being honest. This story made me incredibly fucking uncomfortable. And that's a personal thing. But the level of hatred put into the words every time someone said the word Catholic really got under my skin. And that's a personal preference. Other people won't feel that. I wasn't expecting to feel that, but I did. Particularly given that this came out in the 60s, when in certain parts of Ireland, relationships between Catholics and Protestants weren't the greatest. Now, this was a historical event. This happened. But the way that it's portrayed, I found incredibly uncomfortable. And the other two things that sort of really reduced the score for me was, and I don't know if this is a loose cannon thing, we try not to dock points based on loose cannon choices because that's not what was in the actual episode. I don't know, and I couldn't find out. The painting that they use at the end to depict what happens. I don't know if the BBC used that painting and that's why loose cannon used it, or if loose cannon made that choice themselves. But that painting is fucking sickening, and it's a horrible thing to include in the end of a Doctor Who story. You have people being decapitated, you have dead babies in the street. It is absolutely unnecessary for the point you're trying to get across. And I just thought it was there's decapitation, hangings, piles of dead children. What the fuck were you thinking? Putting that at the end of it. And I get that you want to have a visceral response. It's a massacre. It's not meant to be, hearing the two Vikings get killed off screen in the Time Meddler. It's not meant to be like that. It's not meant to evoke the same emotions. However, this show is meant for children. That was incredibly fucking inappropriate. In my mind. I don't know if you feel the same way, but for me, that was incredibly inappropriate.
So, I want to make a distinction, okay?
Mm-hmm.
And again, when I said that, okay, I thought the story was fucking incredible. Everything, excluding all the elements of Doctor Who, so excluding Stephen and excluding the thing with the Doctor, I would have gladly have watched a 4-parter about just the massacre itself, because the acting in it was brilliant. The characters were really because Stephen bumbles along between scene to scene. He doesn't really have a huge fucking impact. And this is the thing, is that a question that's often asked when people talk about the classic series is if the Doctor's not in it, can it be any good? Or if the party is split, can it be any good? Now, Stephen finds himself in a story where he carries the most of it. But I honestly think that this is a story where the story carries Stephen.
Yeah, I would agree on that.
The whole thing of it is that I was genuinely excited to watch each new episode of this story, because I don't know whether it was just the fact that I like history, or if it was just I was really into all the other historical actors. But I was really I was brought into it, and I was the point there where it was we were raised Catholic, and obviously in Ireland, Catholics were the ones that were in the lower tier of how things went. So to see it flipped it was really surreal. And the painting at the end, it's, as I said, it's a fucking haunting painting, and you can't not look at that painting and not be unnerved, even in the slightest. And it's without being overly graphic, it's as visceral as the time would have dictated, I suppose. If we were to look at that, if we were to kind of put that comparatively to now, I don't know what you could levy it up against, but the Doctor Who components of this story are bad. They are. with the exception of William Hartnell's amazing speech at the end.
Yeah. Which had me bawling my eyes out.
Yeah. But like, that's the only part of the Doctor Who component of the story that I like. The other stuff that I like about it is everything to do with the intrigue and the build-up and the execution of the massacre itself through the historical characters. And,
yeah, I can get that.
And that's where my confusion over how to score this came about. Am I scoring Doctor Who, or am I scoring historical period drama?
Yeah, and I mean, you raised the point of, like, you'd be interested in watching a 4-parter just devoted to the massacre. You know, I don't want people to think that the comments I made earlier are that, like, I don't want to acknowledge any time that anyone other than Catholics are persecuted. That's totally not what I mean. I would be quite interested to watch a documentary on this, or watch a series dedicated to this, you know, with those characters and whatever. But this is Doctor Who. And for me, for Doctor Who, this story was shockingly bad. Even the ending, right? So you got Hartnell's amazing monologue, and I love it. And I went back and I listened to it several times, and I was bawling my eyes out, right? But Stephen's return and Jojo, Stephen's return and Dodo join the team were so horribly written. And I'm like, what the hell was that? It's so bumbling. And to your point, Stephen bumbles from scene to scene. You know, you messaged me saying, like, oh, can Stephen carry a show by himself? No, he fucking can't, is my opinion.
Like, this was the platform. This was the platform for Stephen's solo adventure, and it's done really badly.
Yeah, I think I was so disappointed, and it wasn't until I looked up the trivia that I realised why I was so disappointed, which is that John Lucarotti has written some amazing stories, and this is what they do. What he gave them. This is what came out of it. You know, I was very interested in watching each episode. Literally, the episode ended and I queued up the next one straight away, and I wanted to jump in. Not for the intrigue. I'm not a big fan of court intrigue. Those aren't my personal preferences, right? In terms of shows. So that's not my thing, but that's just a personal preference thing.
Yeah.
That part was done quite well on its own, right? I was queuing in going, where's the Doctor? When are we going to see the wink to the camera that the abbot is the Doctor? Where are we going to see? I wanted the Doctor back. And, you know, we made comment earlier on how, you know, up until, you know, we've done this watch through, usually I watched William Hartnell stories for Ian and Barbara. That was my thing for the last 10 years. The one thing this solidifies for me is that I want more of William Hartnell.
Yeah.
I want more of him. And this didn't give me that.
So, what does yours? Because we've been like, this is gonna be a very long episode, but I think justifiably so. What's your scoring on it?
Okay, I've changed this twice while we've been talking, and I've changed it daily. Yeah. So, for context, my scoring on this was between a 2.5 and a 3.
Mm-hmm.
And to be honest, after the conversation we've just had, there's 2.75 written in front of my face.
Yeah.
But no, I'm going with my 2.5. I did not enjoy it as an episode of Doctor Who. I think skip it. Fuck it. It doesn't matter. If you're a fan of Stephen, I'm sure you love it. But I'm not. So I didn't.
I was kind of like you as well, that I was... my score changed. Like, at one point I had this score of 4. And then, like, I realised that, wait a minute, okay, gotta go back and take a look at it. And I was like... I'm scoring the intrigue component of it. I'm scoring the historical component. I'm not scoring the Doctor Who component of it. And this is, and so I think for me, this is the thing, is that I really enjoyed watching this because of the intrigue. And unfortunately I can't find this without the Doctor Who component of it. So I've given this a 3 because of it's just so weird, is that I'd recommend people to watch it if they're into, like, you know, like what the historical components of it like are in Doctor Who, if you want to see a really well written historical component. But if you're looking to see kind of a Doctor Who historical serial, it's not so much for you. And like even now I'm kind of fluctuating between like, okay, well that makes no sense. Like should it be a 2.5 in that regards or a 3? So I'm gonna meet halfway on both points. I'm gonna make it a 2.75.
I think the thing for me that now makes a lot more sense, and this is a personal opinion, and bear in mind for everyone, these are mine and Paddy's personal opinions. If you love this story, all the credit to you. This is one of the last, I think the Gunfighters is the last true historical story.
No, the Highlanders.
The Highlanders is the last.
The second story of Pat Troughton's run.
With a story like this, I can understand why they stopped doing them.
Yeah. And like, to be honest with you, like, I kind of want... There was a story during the 13th Doctor's run, The Demons of the Punjab, which is as close to a purely historical story as they have gotten in years. And I would like to see a return. I honestly would, like, no, obviously it has to be well written. It's got to be back in the golden days of, like, you know, John Lucarati and even like still during the time period of Ian and Barbara, because that's when they were best written.
Yeah.
So I would like to see something of that caliber written in the modern.
Yeah, I think Rosa as well is another one that was very close to being a pure historical, but I think it would have done really well as a pure historical as well. But
absolutely,
that's a conversation for like what, 7 years from now?
Something like that. So yeah, like this is right. This is probably one of the most interesting ones to discuss, because even like we're still not certain about our feelings on it, even at the end of it. Or we have certainty on some feelings, but not overall as a whole. Like we're not walking away like this from the Romans, which is like, 5. So, guys, as I said, interesting discussion. We have a new companion on the TARDIS. We have Stephen holding on after throwing a bit of a hissy. So next week we'll see how all these components will gel together as we follow the Dr. Stephen and our new friend Dodo, not Dorothea, Dodo, in the Ark.
Bye.
Bye.